So I had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and on Friday morning, I thought I've got a bunch of errands to run before the big Black Friday sale was about to happen. So I ran over to Suioka's and I made another stop, and I ended up at Big Save, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to grab my stuff and head home. And I was in line with a few groceries that I had, and a woman walked up to me that I had recognized, for she's been to church before, and I've had a few meaningful conversations with her. And she just, I was in line, and my groceries were getting checked, and she just came up and said, "Pastor Allen, thank you so much." And I looked into her eyes, and she just had gratitude that was just deeply expressed. I could see it in her eyes, and for the life of me, I couldn't think what I had done to have her come express her appreciation to me like that. But I didn't have to think long, because a second later she said, "We were one of the families that got one of your church's Thanksgiving dinner boxes." And for those of you that might be visiting, last week, or earlier this week actually, we donated 10 boxes to people in the community that we thought may not be able to have Thanksgiving dinner at home, because they might just not have as much as some of the rest of us. So we put these boxes together, and she was just telling me how for the last few years her family has not had Thanksgiving at home because it's just too expensive. They couldn't afford it. And she went on to say how meaningful it was to be able to have Thanksgiving at home as a family and to invite another family to their house. And as she was going on, I just thought, oh my gosh, I am just so honored to be a part of a church that does that kind of stuff for people in our community. And so I asked her if it was okay if I would share this with the congregation this morning, because I thought she thanked me, but really through me, she was thanking all of you. So I wanted to extend that thanks, that gratitude to all of you. And as we were finishing the conversation, I was just very, very moved. And then I looked up and realized all my groceries had been checked out for a while, and she was waiting for my credit card, and there was another man standing in line. And at first I thought, oh no, I'm holding everybody up. They all had smiles on their faces, and they weren't telling me to hurry up, buddy, or anything. It was kind of like they were just like all caught up in this holy moment together. It was like a little community of 4 or 5 of us that were just so grateful that our church was doing something for people in our community in a really meaningful way. And I just thought, this truly is a holy moment. And I wanted to share that with you as a congregation, because you did this. The only thing I did is I wrote the little notes on the end of the thing saying, happy Thanksgiving, or God bless you, Pastor Allen. But I even went to Penny about a week ago and said, what else do we still need? Thinking, well, I'll wait and see what other people donate, and then I'll figure out and throw in whatever I can to those boxes. And she said, we're done. We have the turkeys, we have the dinner rolls, we have all the side dishes, we're done. And I thought, well, I guess I'll just have to wait and help out a little more at Christmas time, doggone it. But I was really, really touched that our congregation just really stepped up to the plate to do this, literally up to the plate. So that, no pun intended, I heard some giggling out there. But really, I just thought, wow, isn't that fantastic? And as I was standing there in line, I remember just thinking, this is really what this season is all about. Sometimes we get so busy and caught up in all the things and all the busy little chores and traditions that we do that it is actually easy to forget why we do all this in the first place. And I was thinking especially of the gift of Christmas, and how God sent Jesus into the world to be the living presence of love for all of us. And this is the time of year where we just take a deep breath and slow down a little bit, even though we're busy, and just say, thank you, God, for that special gift of your love in this world as demonstrated through Jesus and Jesus' church, which is us. I was also thinking how when we express love, kindness, compassion to other people, we are actually expressing those very things to God. In this morning's gospel lesson that Angela just so beautifully read to us just a few moments ago, has Jesus telling a parable to really make that point. And in the parable, Jesus is talking to his disciples. It's towards the end of his ministry. And in fact, I want you to pay attention to this. This is the last of all of Jesus' parables in the Gospel of Matthew. And then the very next thing Jesus says is, in 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. And then what happens next is Jesus' arrest, his suffering, his crucifixion, and then, of course, his resurrection. But this parable that Jesus tells is his final parable, the last teaching he actually leaves with his disciples. And so I want you to think about this parable and just how meaningful it must have meant to them, thinking, this is really the last thing Jesus said to us when we were all together. It was his last teaching. So in this parable, Jesus explains that there's an emperor, and the emperor has an empire, and many English translations say kingdom and a king. But when you read those words in the Greek, it's the exact same language as the Roman Empire and the emperor of Rome. And I think many of our English translations just tone it down a bit to say kingdom, because it just sounds a little more quaint, perhaps, or a little easier a bit easier of a feel. But this is the big Roman Empire that Jesus and his disciples and everyone else in the day is living under, and it's oppressive. And it's really important for us to realize that when that word basileus comes up, that's the root word for both empire and emperor. And Jesus is very clearly distinguishing the empire of Rome and an altogether new way of being in the world called the empire of heaven, which we often read in our translations, the kingdom of heaven. The literal translation is actually the empire of the heavens. Okay? So Jesus is explaining all of his parables up to this point using that language, and now finally he talks about this emperor who later on, sometime in the future, gathers together all the people of his kingdom or his empire. And he looks at all the people who have shown compassion to others and treated others with kindness and showed love to people all around him, including the people way out on the margins of society. And he says to all the people who showed compassion, come with me, be with me. This is your reward. Basically, we get to be together for a long, long time, for eternity, because you showed me such compassion. And in the parable, Jesus said, this emperor said to all these people that showed compassion, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me. When I was sick, you came and visited me and took care of me. And when I was in prison, you visited me there. And all the people that showed compassion probably just scratched their heads and said, when did we ever do any of this to you, O mighty emperor? And the emperor said to them, whenever you did it to anybody, you did it to me. In fact, Jesus says in Matthew's gospel, whenever you did these things to the least of those who are members of my family, you did it to me. And that is crucial, that part about family, because in empires, the only people that get to truly enjoy the empire are the royal family. All the masses of people are out there, and the emperor and the empress and the princesses and the princes and all the people that move in those circles, they know that they're all family and they all marry together, and they look down on everybody else and consider them not our family. In fact, they're all just not really important at all. They're just the great masses of people. And what Jesus has been doing all along is explaining to people, we're all family. We're all not just part of a big empire, but we're part of a special royal family. There's no distinction. I've shared with you before that one of my very favorite Bible commentators is a man by the name of Warren Carter, and he actually wrote 2 commentaries on the book of Matthew, Matthew and Empire, and Matthew and the Margins. And they're both very large books, and they really take a look at what was happening in the day of Jesus. And he gets into it and says, everything that Matthew taught about Jesus is with this assumption, this basis of the fact that Jesus was comparing the Roman Empire to a whole other way of being in the world called the empire of the heavens. And he's basically saying everything you know about reality and the way we live can be different. And Warren Carter, in his books, goes on to explain that in the Roman Empire, a very small percentage of the people, the royal family, controlled almost all of the wealth. They controlled pretty much everything. And the great masses of people struggled to get by. They had virtually no health care. They had very, very little money to buy food. All the things that the people who were the poorest couldn't afford, the people who were the very small percentage, probably less than 5%, could afford everything and anything they needed. And that was the way of the empire as people knew it. And Jesus came along and basically said there's a whole new way of being where poor people matter, where sick people matter, where people in prison matter, where people who are on the farthest margins of society, the people that are kind of kicked to the curb, they matter to me. And they matter to anyone who wants to follow me. As I was thinking this week about just how very important this message is to Jesus and how Warren Carter explains that's the basis for everything, I was looking at this morning's passage about empire, and I thought so much of what Warren Carter writes about empires apply to the nations of the world today, and in many ways to our own nation, where it's just assumed that the way things are always going to be, where a small percentage of the people control almost all the wealth, and the great masses of people throughout the world suffer, and that's just okay because that's the way things are. And the message that Jesus gave to his disciples 2,000 years ago is the same message for us today. That doesn't need to be the way things are. We can change it. In fact, we don't have to wait. We can start living right now like all of the ways that we can be in that new empire, the empire of the heavens. We can start acting right now like we're living in that empire. And that's exactly what Jesus did. Now, the interesting thing is, Jesus knew that it was risky business to act like that, to teach like that, and to stand up and say, this is the way things can be. Now, as I was looking at just the progression of Matthew, the gospel, and how this is the very final parable, and then Jesus is arrested, and then Jesus is virtually tortured and then crucified, death by torture, it occurred to me that, we too take on some risk when we say we're going to follow Jesus. I hope none of us dies. I doubt it. But it is risky business for us as well to say, the way things are not the way things have to be. Now, you've heard me say before, there's mission where we go out and feed hungry people, like we're going to do this Wednesday, some of us, at the Salvation Army soup kitchen. And mission is when we put together boxes for people who are hungry now. And mission is when we collect our change out in that change jar for people during Christmas time. And the stamps for people that we put together that Grace Eleanor helps us with, for people who are emotionally and mentally handicapped. And mission is when we do things because people are suffering. But Jesus' big picture of empire wasn't just about that. It was also about addressing the causes of hunger, of not having enough drinking water, of people getting thrown into prison who probably don't belong there, of people who are sick simply because they don't have adequate health care, even though it's available out there. Jesus cared passionately about justice as well as about mission. And so my encouragement to you as we think about all the good things we do that are mission oriented, which are fantastic, and we need to keep doing them because the need is still out there. We haven't arrived at that perfect empire yet. I think we know that. But we need to keep looking in our society, in our community, in our nation, and in the world and say, how can I act as an individual as if we're already living in this new way of being? Because that is what creates the empire, the new empire that Jesus talked about, that encouraged us to look forward to. We don't have to wait until we die to live in the empire of the heavens. We can start right now making a difference in one person's life, in one family's life, in one community's life. It's so important that we do things like bringing Thanksgiving turkeys to people. It made a big difference to many families just this week. But it's also important that we vote, that we show up to community organizations and speak what we believe is the right thing, and that we write to our congressmen and women and say what we believe is the right thing to do, what is the just and loving and compassionate thing to do. As I stand before you as your pastor today, I'm just thrilled as I look out among the congregation knowing how you participate in both mission and justice. Because I look at some of you and I know you're out there in the community saying, this is wrong. We're not going to just sit silently and let this happen. We have to take care of the Aina. We have to take care of the water. We have to take care of our people. And we've got to do a better job at it. And in the meantime, if someone's hungry, we're going to give them some food. If someone is sick, we're going to help them in any way we can. In closing, I just want to thank you as a congregation for being that kind of congregation. As I think about the closing of the parable where Jesus basically gathered all the people who showed compassion and said, thank you. Your reward is you get to be with me and you get to be together. I think that's what this church is. We get to be with God, and we get to be together, and we get to make the world a more compassionate and loving place. Pretty sure that's what church means. That's what it means to me anyway. And I thank you for being here today and for being a part of this church or whatever church you go to on the mainland or whatever, or wherever you happen to live. I thank you because you do make a huge, huge difference just by showing up and saying, I believe in that, and I'm going to be a part of that. So thank you.